Welcome to the Triage Method Podcast Q&A edition with me, Gary McGowan, and my co-host, Mr. Patrick Farrell. This week's question is going to be, can you just do more and more and more steps in an attempt to, one, lose more body fat, or two, maybe maintain or gain at a higher level of calories? Because I know some people do like to do that. So is there a threshold at which we should maybe stop increasing steps, or is 30,000 just a cool recommendation for everyone?
Yeah, so first of all, with this discussion, just to do a little quick recap,
A little preface.
preface, I believe they actually are supposed to say. I always say preface, but it's preface apparently.
I agree.
But anyway, look. So just to put a little preface to this, steps contribute to what's called non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So it's like the non-exercise stuff that you do that does actually contribute to your metabolism. And this is one of the areas that in the last, we'll say 20 years perhaps, has become most coaches and health professionals have become increasingly aware that this does play a relatively large role in terms of your ability to regulate your body composition and to an extent your health as well, right? And there's multiple mechanisms for that, steps does increase lymphatic drainage and all that kind of stuff. There's loads of benefits that go along with increasing levels of activity, right? So that's the first concept. But in the health and fitness sphere that we are in, you will often see people effectively prescribing an increasing number of steps, getting up to 10, 20, 30,000 steps per day. And there obviously is a point where there's diminishing returns on that, and it's just actually completely impractical to implement. It's just not a valid thing. However, there are obviously both limitations, cons, if you will, and then pros to the approach. Because obviously, if you just do increasing number of steps, you burn more calories in a relatively easy manner, right? But let's just take it back a little bit. So most health organizations recommend you get somewhere in around 10,000 steps per day, right? Now, that is a bit of an arbitrary number, I'm pretty sure it was actually created by a company that sold pedometers, if I remember correctly. So it is arbitrary. However, it does seem to be correlated quite well with health outcomes and, naturally enough, body composition outcomes, right? So that's the whole preface to this, that steps increase your energy expenditure, and they do so in a relatively low impact manner that is also correlated with good health outcomes in terms of bone density, lymphatic drainage, cardiovascular adaptations and stuff. It's a very positive thing, right? So that's the background on this, right? So steps good, right? They're great, right? Try to get somewhere around the 10,000 mark for the majority of people. That's what the suggestion is, right? Now, naturally enough, as we've discussed on previous podcasts, some people are going to find it hard to get their steps up over 4,000 per day. They have a very sedentary job. They live in Ireland as well. Pisses rain for 390 days of a 365-day year. So it's always raining. It's very hard to get outside and get your steps up. It's just the case, right? So a lot of people do find it very hard to get their steps up, and that's okay. You just have to eat fewer calories, and that might not be okay to you. So the only other way to combat that is to increase your activity, and steps is one way to do that, right? So a lot of coaches these days have been suggesting that you should track your steps, and we live for that, right? We're all for that. It's a great intervention you can use to really help your clients stay on track with their health and fitness, body composition, performance, whatever goals. Great intervention, right? However, there is also this kind of natural enough thought process, especially around dieting. And although Gary did touch on it, it does occur in gaining phases as well, where, okay, look, the calories we're at, we don't really want to drop them down. You don't have enough time to do cardio, or perhaps you think doing actual cardio is going to potentially hinder your gains, or it's too fatiguing, right? But you do have enough time to increase your steps, So it's a natural enough modality to bring in where you're right, the general recommendation we've been saying is 10,000 steps per day. You've been hitting 10,000. but you know what? We want to just push this fat loss phase a little bit. So let's see if we can bring that up to 15,000, right? Again, that's a good intervention potentially, right? And I would probably be like, all right, that's in that case, if that's the intervention that we need to use to get results with this client, happy days. That's fine. It's cool with me, especially if it doesn't impact their life too much, and especially if they can have an active job anyway, like they can be on their feet. That's cool, right? But there does come a point where doing more steps either requires you to burn more energy, like it actually becomes fatiguing, right? Or it just becomes completely impractical. Right? You have a sedentary job, and now all of a sudden you're doing 4 hours of walking per day just to get your steps in. It's like, that's not practical. Like, yeah, if you're a personal trainer and you're on your feet all day, running around the gym, maybe doing classes and whatever else, it's like, yeah, of course you can get up to 30,000 steps per day. That's like, of course, so you understandably think then, oh yeah, like obviously everyone can do this. But if you move from an active job to a sedentary job, it's very hard to get even over like 6,000 steps per day, so there is obviously a point, and it's different for everyone with their different lifestyles and different recovery abilities and whatever else. And effectively, to answer the question, no, you can't just keep, well, like physiologically, you can just keep increasing steps and burn more energy, right? There obviously is a time point where it's maybe less effective, and we'll say the body starts falling apart a little bit, like you might start getting like overuse injuries in like your fucking metatarsals or something, or your ankle or your knee, or something might start falling apart. You can't just go from 4,000 steps per day to 30,000 steps per day and expect to be able to adapt to that. Like people do that all the time, where like, I don't know, like say for example, like we went to London before, and walking around London, very easy to get a lot of steps in. Like obviously, even if you're on the tube and whatever else, like it's still very easy to get a lot of steps in, especially on a sunny or relatively sunny day in London, man, you can walk the place. It's easy, and you could easily get up to 30 to 50,000 steps in a day, exploring on your holidays, whatever, right? But if you were to do that every single day, that it's probably not a great approach, right? But even people that just do it for one day, like generally you'll find like, oh, I went to London for the weekend and both days I got 30,000 steps and my calves are in bits, or, like, oh, my feet just feel real swollen and they're just, I'm getting these blisters and whatever else, like the wheels start falling off the wagon if you just dramatically increase your steps every single day, right? So yes, you physiologically can increase your steps continually and get more and more and more results, but it's probably not the best approach. Either the wheels are going to fall off the wagon initially because you're just going to dramatically increase your steps, or energy expenditure is going to be too high, and as a result fatigue is actually going to start to accumulate, or it just becomes completely impractical and that you have to end up walking for 6 hours of the day, and it basically just becomes actual exercise, like activity thermogenesis. It's not like non-exercise. It's that's your exercise now. You're 6 hours of walking per day. So this is not generally an intervention that I use. Once people start getting over 15,000 steps per day, I'm like, all right, look, I just rather see you losing some calories rather than losing your mind trying to, walk for 8 hours a day to get these steps up. Now, obviously, we also train a lot of coaches. So there are those individuals that I have that like maybe they work 4 days per week and their steps are up at 30,000 steps per day. And like, it is what it is. I'm not going to tell you to do less because you're going to probably be less effective at your job then, but with those individuals, with those clients, I'm probably going to bring in more calories to support that. They might be able to diet on more calories, or like Gary was saying at the start, there are those individuals that want to do more steps while they are gaining just so they can eat more. And again, that's perfectly fine up until the point where it becomes impractical with the number of hours you have to do it, or it starts actually becoming fatiguing, and you'll probably notice this, that like if you go for an hour walk or whatever, like if you are dieting, for example, you might start noticing that your legs feel a bit kind of empty, they're a little bit fatigued, like an hour walk could be a fatiguing event that has to be effectively tracked in your week of fatiguing events, and your recovery has to be allocated to that, so there are some practical limitations to this, and to be honest, I just don't view it as a good long-term modality to bring in once people start getting over that kind of 15K mark, unless their job is very active anyway, and in that case, then I just get them to eat more.
Yeah, like I think this is one of those things where you do have to be able to think in a kind of a non-linear manner, because like it can be a bit confusing if you're not thinking in those terms, because what you might hear initially is that being generally active in your day-to-day life can actually help with recovery from training. And if you hear that, and then you also hear us say doing too many steps is going to harm your recovery, you're like, whoa, what's going on here? So like the important thing to understand is that, like, not sitting all day and just walking around, keeping a little bit active, getting some blood flowing, like that can improve your recovery. And there's multiple kind of mechanistic reasons you could hypothesize as to why that might be the case. For example, in your lower limbs, like basically the way that we return waste products upwards to get rid of them is through muscle pumping. Fundamentally, your calves contracting, it helps with venous return, so the blood coming back to your heart. It also helps with the pumping of the lymphatic system.
Wait, so you saying the fact that I don't have calves is a poor health, like their health risk? Like,
yeah, it probably is. Yeah, sorry, bro.
Shit.
But yeah, so like, there's that side of things. Also, when you're moving around, it encourages blood flow to the area, and obviously blood has to be flowing to an area for it to bring the nutrients required for the recovery process. So like, there's reason to believe that you'll feel a little bit looser, you might recover a bit better if you're being generally active. But like,
and you might even get, just on top of the why it improves recovery, you might get some like a little bit more GLUT4 translocation to the cell, because you've got some like contraction stimulated release of that GLUT4 and whatever, or translocation of that GLUT4. So you start getting a bit more nutrients into those muscles as well. You might notice your blood sugar regulation is better. Like, there's tons and tons of health benefits to this that both improve recovery and then also, improve your health in general.
100%. And I think when we start to promote all of those things, like, the metabolic effects, like you were alluding to, potentially improvements in recovery, if you're really unfit, even an improvement in fitness, and potentially even an improvement in muscle strength, if you're an elderly person. So there's all these benefits, but we have to understand that there's always a point where they start to basically compromise other processes. So, as we said, that is light activity. So if you're constantly using your legs all day, for 30,000 steps, you are using up local muscle glycogen stores. You're going to be using up fuel that is stored there. And you're going to be basically just fatiguing yourself and delaying the recovery process more. And as you alluded to, like when we go to London, if you've gone to any city on a European break, any European city on a city break, whatever, and you've gone for like lots of walking, like I remember when I was in Rome, I clocked up like 30,000 steps a day, and it even precipitated the start of an Achilles tendinopathy. Like for me, I had already aggravated it from running, and then that just pushed me over the edge, those steps. So like that was pretty stupid on my end, and it seems like thing, but it does prove that like this actually does kind of become exercise at a certain point. And if you've ever yourself, you come home at the end of the day, back to the apartment, and you're good. You feel wrecked. It's not just the shopping, the follow your significant other around the shop or hanging around the pennies that makes you tired, although that does contribute 100%.
Oh, yeah.
The steps themselves, like they do contribute to your fatigue. So it's important not to get too carried away with that. And as you said, like for me, it is kind of around that like 15,000 mark that I view things as being a little bit less practical. And that's not something that's based on, evidence to show that this is the cutoff for recovery, but rather that if we're getting to that point, I view that as being most of someone's free time, in terms of like they're not doing anything else, like they're not training, they're not, and if they're trying to get in 15,000 steps all outside of that, like to me, like that's a lot of your time that you're using up, and I'd rather you were using
unless
that
you have an
for
active
other
job,
Yeah, if it's just your work, like just don't worry about it. That's your baseline, and you've adapted to that. And that's another part of the discussion, is that there's a difference between having always done these steps and increasing to that level. And that kind of comes back to what you said at the start in terms of 10,000 isn't a magic number. And like recently, over the last like year or two, we've seen a lot of people coming out with articles like trying to be nerdy, like even doctors and stuff being like, oh, the 10,000 steps rule has been debunked. And I was just thinking, like, hold on, did you think this was like an actual rule? Like, I presume we all just knew this was just a generic recommendation. You know, it's like five servings of fruits and vegetables per day. Like, yeah, there's it's not perfect. Like, there more would be better. But look, if most people aren't getting five, let's start there. Like,
Like
it's a meme.
all of
It
these
serves
things,
a
yeah,
purpose.
literally, it's just a recommendation, like to be like, all right, this is our starting point. Like that 5 fruit and veg was made up by the California Growers Association, like, literally to sell more fruit and veg. It wasn't a health recommendation, but it does correlate or seem to correlate with better health outcomes. You know, same with the 10,000 steps. As I said, like I'm pretty sure it was a pedometer company that just, like, yeah, 10,000 steps. Let's get people to fucking track their steps with our pedometer. And then it becomes, they're like, oh, well, the people that do this seem to get better health outcomes, so let's recommend this. You know?
Yeah, 100%. Like, it's just again is like, it's just a meme. It's something that can be passed on very easily, that everyone can get really quickly and easily remember. And it's like, okay, cool, yeah, I'm just going to work towards that. If you do hold yourself strictly to 10,000 being the magic number, I don't think that's a great idea, because that's not necessarily the case. And that's especially true for, I think, a lot of individuals that would listen to this podcast. You know, if you're training really hard for 2 hours a day, like, and if you're doing that multiple times per day, for example, or if you have other means of activity such as manual labor that isn't tracked as steps, you have to realize that all of those things are coming into the activity equation as well. And that actually does bring an important part of that, an important question that a lot of people have of this, and that is our steps still important for me if I'm already exercising? And the answer would be yes, you know, because in general,
Right. Well, I can't hear you right now, so I don't know if our viewers or listeners can hear you. But yeah, it definitely is important to keep track of your steps at all times, even if you are training hard, even if you are, you know, not training hard. Like, it is a variable that is important across the life cycle of pretty much all humans. Now, again, it doesn't mean that you have to track it religiously, like Ari was saying. Like, it's not like 10,000 is this magic number that you must hit. You know, like if that's the case, and it's like, oh, you need to hit 10,000. It's like, okay, well, if 10,000 is a magic number, does that mean that if you do 10,001, that's bad? You know, like you can't just be like, all right, this is the lower limit, the exact number. Because if that's the case, it's like my 10,000 steps at someone who's like just below 6'6" versus Gary's 10,000 steps at someone that's, you know, 5'5". Then they're not the same thing. You know, like I'm burning more calories by doing that. I'm going to be traveling a longer distance by doing that. So does that mean that because Gary's a manlet, he has to, you know, make up more steps? Does he have to do 15,000 to my 10,000? You know, are we equating for calories? Like, why is this the exact number? You know?
yes, sir. And yeah, I don't think people, I think I cut out, so sorry if you didn't hear what I was saying, but I think Paddy basically carried on. But basically the point of my message was that, you know, being active in addition to your standard exercise is a good idea, but that we have to accept that there are going to be trade-offs at a certain point. And I think a lot of the people that do actually end up trying to push steps a bit too far at times, potentially compromise their goals more than the average general population person, because very often it's people who are like in contest prep or trying to get really lean and maximize their muscle mass at the same time, trying to keep everything there. And I don't think doing 20,000 steps a day on top of your training in a situation that's already catabolic is going to be conducive of you maintaining the best leg growth you could, you know. And it's the same for, you know, GA players. You know, I coach some GA players and they already, you know, accumulate a lot of steps. And I'm not thinking, like, when we're thinking about fat loss, I don't want to push them to 20,000 steps a day, because sometimes their steps that they're doing at training are not included in that as well. And they need their legs for their sport, and they could be training 3 to 5 times per week, depending on if they're playing, you know, club and county or club and college. So you do have to keep these things in mind. Like, if you're someone who is just kind of a casual exerciser, like, yeah, you like exercise, you know, you listen to a lot of audiobooks and you have a lot of free time, if you want to get 20,000 steps a day, like, cool, that's no problem. Like, if it's not impeding your life in some way. It's not taking away from time spent on other things, and you don't see any negative side effects. Doing 20,000 steps a day is fine. But the point of this is that it wouldn't be a general recommendation for most of our clients. But having said that, there are probably less than a hand of my clients who do get 15,000 to 20,000 or even more in some cases, but largely that's because of either having to commute to work by foot, that being their preference, or working a really active job, such as, being a personal trainer or a nurse on a busy hospital with lots of floors that you're up and down or whatever, these types of things.
Yeah. So basically, to wrap it all up, you physiologically and physically can go up to 20, 30, 50 steps. It doesn't matter. Like, I remember I went on an 11-hour hike in America and got 60,000 steps, but to go on an 11-hour hike to get your steps up to 60,000, it's probably not, ideal from a practical standpoint, if you're trying to live your life as well, so physically, yeah, you can do it. It'll burn calories. It'll contribute to your, metabolism. But you also have to be aware that it probably does detract from your recovery and probably your performance at some stage, And generally, from a practical standpoint, both from the hours you have to put into it and from the recovery stuff, that point seems to be around the 15 to 20K mark for most people. Once you start getting over 15K, it's kind of like, okay, we're going to either have to eat more just to support this. Like, we basically have to treat this as activity, or you're going to feel the effects. You're going to feel your legs are a bit depleted, whereas that kind of 10 to 15,000 steps per day, like, most people can recover relatively well from that. And like, it's just non-fatiguing, but yeah, so yeah, you can bring your steps up if you want. You can keep going, but it probably comes with more issues than it solves, and realistically, if you are trying to use steps as a modality to increase your rate of fat loss, once you get over that 15K mark, unless it is the case that it's your job that consistently gets you over that 15K mark, like, then I probably would just eat fewer calories and use that to, get the fat loss results that I'm looking for,
Yep. And for some real world context, practice what you preach and all that. I was just looking on the Garmin app. In the last year, I've taken 3,715,406 steps. So that should be your annual target, which is an average of basically 10,200 a day. So like, that's,
excuse me,
what you say?
Did you actually need an app to count that? Do you not keep track of that in your head?
Oh yeah, I do. Obviously, like, I was just rechecking. That's all. But yeah, so I have like 10,200 a day basically. But if you look at that, when you actually look at my graph, what you see is that it's up and down month to month and month to month and month to month. So their life is going to change the amount of steps that you normally get. And I'm not too stressed if I'm like at 8,000 or even 6,000 sometimes. Like, sometimes I might cycle to college and then I'll be doing jiu-jitsu in the evening, and they're not steps, but it is, again, activity, and it all does contribute. So don't be stressing out if you don't hit 10,000 one day. Like, I always say that to my clients, look, this is a weekly target. If you get 6,000 one day, you were stuck in work late, you had to drive to the gym, you were in a rush, you had no time to do steps after, that's absolutely fine. Because again, like, this is one of those things that, very much like nutrition, it can be another stressor at times if you worry so much about the numbers that you're caught up in the day-to-day all the time. So just focus on those trends over time. Like, that is what it's all about. And if you can just nail those things over a long period of time and not sweat the day-to-day stuff, that's really what kind of moves the needle forward in the long run.
Dead right, Gary. So where can people follow us?
As always, guys, you can check out the Triage Method newsletter at the link below. And that goes out every Sunday. And that basically includes all of the content that we post throughout the week, including recommended resources from other places around the interwebs, along with an exclusive article on a topic that won't have been covered on our other social media. You can also join the Triage Method community, which is our free open access Facebook group. Plenty of productive discussion in there, and a great place to get into if you have a longer form question that you'd like the input of not just us, but other trainers as well. And then, as always, guys, services available one-to-one, and group online coaching is available. So you can sign up to those, or you can just get involved with our program templates or our beginner's guidebook in the store as well on site.
Dead right. I've nothing else to add except I hope everyone is doing well. And at this stage, this is obviously going to come out on the Thursday, but we're recording this on the Sunday. So, the world could have fallen apart in the meantime. We could be on lockdown, could be martial law, people could be getting shot in the streets. And it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Be good crack anyway. Nothing else.
Yeah. Anyway, peace out, guys. Enjoy.